Hello and welcome. Thank you, Ideagen, for this wonderful 17 Days of Sustainability. I am Kathy Cheng, the Associate Director of Admissions at Phillips Exeter. I have Rafiq Abdus-Sabur with me today, the President and CEO of the Empowered Brain Institute, who began his career in the nonprofit sector as a fellow in the National Leagues of Cities, advocating for policies that impact youth. He works in education as well with families and the municipal level. He is also a teacher, coach, administrator, a consultant for schools, and we are excited to chat with him today. Hello, Rafiq.
Hi, thanks for having me.
How are you this morning?
It's great. The weather's a little bit overcast, but it's a good day here in Cambridge, Massachusetts.
Good, good. Well, please share a little bit about, today we're talking about the continuum of education for divergent learners. And I would love to chat with you a little bit about, what is a divergent learner and what does that mean?
Right. So I think traditionally we think about divergent learners in the context of ability, right? So physical disability. But I think, and we've I would say over the last 20 years or so, we've become more familiar with sort of the acute and unique nature of neurodiversity and the ways it manifests in the life of the student and the experience of the student. So there's the physical ability side, there's the neuro atypical side of it, but I think we also should think about it in this, in the world that we're living now, in the context of gender, sexual preference, religion, culture, learning styles. The list goes on.
The list does go on. Thank you for that. With kind of the work that you've done, I know you've attended Howard as your undergrad and Harvard as a graduate student with your master's in cognitive development. So this is definitely an expertise. But thinking about, as you tell us about divergent learners and what that means, this current world, where does the empowered brain and Prismetrics fit into it in terms of the spectrum of both ends?
Yeah, so I think when we think about it in the context of schooling, and that makes the most sense, right? But I think in order to really do these individuals justice, we need to think about them, through the lifespan. So who will they be as family members, as friends, as colleagues, as coworkers, and as leaders? I think we think about the unique nature of the term itself. Divergent, right? There's a movement to it. There's a kinetic nature to it, and so who will these students become? And I think and what are the unique challenges that they'll face in the era of social media and the decentralization of news and information, right? We need to think about how we can support them along that journey.
And I guess to that question, how are some of the ways we can support them through that journey?
So I think, particularly in the realm of education, it's the field has sort of lagged behind other fields, particularly in the incorporation of new technology, new innovative, disruptive technology, similar to like the medical field. Like education hasn't really been transformed by all the advances that we've experienced in the last even 10, 20 years. So I think that's the first challenge. How do we sort of transform the educational system so that, one, we're better leveraging all the resources at our disposal, all the tools that are out there that other industries are using to be better, and to serve their constituents better, right? And so, so that's the first challenge, I think, is better leveraging the best tools that we have at our disposal. Another piece of it is sort of, I think, bending to the new way of the world. I think in many ways we're living in a special time um, where the voices of those who are disenfranchised and those who are in the minority, we're hearing those voices, and those voices are empowered, and they're changing entire societies, right? You see all the social movements that have sprung up through the advent of this one particular technology, which is social media, right? This one particular platform. And so how do we incorporate that into the way we educate and support our young people? I think this would impact all students, not just divergent learners, but I think we need to get better about figuring out the unique challenges that they face, how we can incorporate that into the school, the way we educate, thinking about it long term. What does it look like in the workplace, and connecting all the dots.
Wow, those are definitely some really great points. And as we kind of think about that, what leads me to think about what are some of the systems that are supporting children all the way through adulthood? And are there resources in place? If not, are there ways in which we can develop resources?
I think there are lots of resources in place. I think they are limited to those who have the most agency, who are the most in the know, and who can work the system. And I think parents are famous for being able to do that, for essentially being able to like find what's out there for their child, and sort of corralling those resources. And I think we meet, but not every parent has that level of agency. Not every parent has that level of privilege. And so how do we democratize the resources and the opportunities that are out there and available for everyone, but somehow only go to a select few? And I think that's a challenge we need to be thinking more critically about, strategically about, and I think and leveraging all the new ways again that we now can have access to people, and sort of lift up their voices in a way that we hear what their needs are, and we can meet those needs, in ways that we haven't been able to do before.
Yeah, absolutely. On the admissions side, I definitely have parents that advocate, and students that have the agency to really request what they need. And I know that some of the stuff and some of the work that you're doing is really within the school systems themselves. Are there other resources besides parents that students can lean into if they don't know what agency they have, if they don't know what resources they have, especially within the learning continuum of,
Mm-hmm.
okay, now I'm at middle school or I'm at high school,
Mm-hmm.
I'm leaving high school, what do my next steps look like? So I guess as we look at that bigger picture, what are some of the resources within the school systems or, institutions like yours that are helping students? How do we tap into that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think it's a complicated answer. One is that we don't really have a good national, and obviously my expertise is in the U.S. And so it would vary by, in other countries, but even within the U.S., we don't have a good national sort of database or place where all of these resources are aggregated and made available to folks. And oftentimes they develop based on the initiative of local leaders. And so what's available varies by state. The platforms and the mechanisms to make families aware, students aware, individuals aware of what's there varies by state and by organization. And so we don't have a good way, we have a few good resources that are sort of attempting to be a national resource and reference. I think in the context of divergent learning, I think about the the Center for Applied Special Technology in their work around universal design for learning. That's essentially a national initiative that, and so you could, it's a good resource. I think about understood.org, another big national resource that may be able to identify local resources. I think about Castle, which is the Center for Social Emotional Learning, and I think they're based in Chicago, but they're also sort of trying to sort of corral what's happening across the country and be a place where people could come to find things. And so we have a few national websites, organizations, but that we don't have a good sort of network and web where we can go. And I think that that's something that we need to work on. And so, any elected officials seeing this, it's a worthwhile project to take on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. And that was quite a list of resources. I'm sure it's not as comprehensive as we would like, but I think that's a wonderful start. I guess one of the things I would love to hear a little bit more about is, you've mentioned technology, you've mentioned, learners as well as resources, but what has, technology, or how has technology played a role in learning, especially given this last year where it's everything from remote, hybrid to now back in person? How has that piece really, how has that piece been for, divergent learners?
Yeah. So it's a good point. I think divergent learners, those with differing abilities, special needs, there are many terms for it. They've suffered the most, I think, in the context of schooling as it went online. And I think because their needs are so much more comprehensive and unique, right? It's not, you can't do the cookie cutter, one way works for everyone, right? They're the exception to the rule in that way. And so they needed that more personalized, they've always needed it. And I think remote learning made it more difficult to provide that personalized care, attention, and support. And so I think they've struggled. And obviously, in one sense, right, it's a legal issue, right? Because schools have been mandated to have to offer these services. And so school districts all over the country are having to deal with potentially being out of compliance with what they're legally held responsible to do. But then the bigger issue is we have these students whose learning is stagnated, and for what's going on 2 years. How do we address that? How do we make up that loss and get them back on track? And I think, unfortunately, most schools weren't ready for this shift to remote learning. Most teachers weren't trained for it. And I think, and so the best of us, I feel like it's been a while since I've been in the classroom, but I still see myself as a teacher. The best of us sort of we had enough innate skills or just like the muscles that you build in doing the work for so long that you can power through, but by and large, I think it was a struggle for educators. Students really suffered. And that's just in the remote learning context. I think there are lots of other tools, technology tools, and I'm an advocate for technology. There are a lot of other tools that have yet to really sort of hit make an impact in classrooms, and many of them have a huge impact for change.
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a hard year, and educators are doing a lot of really incredible work. With that, I guess you've mentioned some of the tools. What are some of the technology tools that students can use and, parents can really look for?
Yeah, so, I think it's hard if schools aren't integrating these tools, right? It's hard for families and students to get the most out of them. And I think many of the tools that could have the biggest impact are on the sort of like empowering the educator. If we think about the way in which an exoskeleton makes the job of lifting easier, right? There are tools that I think would make educating, teaching and learning easier for teachers. And I think some of those have been integrated. And I think social emotional learning is an amazing tool that helps sort of like flesh out the whole student. It helps educators to think about in the event that it's a child not performing academically to the extent that we think they're capable, like what else is going on there, and do they have other strengths that we can lean on to help channel into these other areas. And so that's a huge thing. I think data analytics, most teachers didn't go to graduate school in the sort of quantitative with a quantitative curriculum where they learn how to use data and make spreadsheets and analyze it and make the decisions off of that. But I think it's an important skill, and I think those tools have gotten easier and more accessible. And I think it would be a transformative piece, that if teachers were to embrace it and it would allow it to inform their teaching, it could be, I think it's super important. There are also other things like the introduction of like augmented reality, to the extent that schools and the teaching and learning hasn't really changed that much from the time that it was adopted, and adopted from Prussia and implemented here as a sort of manufacturing-based or industry-based model. It hasn't really changed. And so there, I think like augmented reality, effective computing, therapeutic robotics, there's all this stuff happening in these domains that could very much impact and improve the field of education if we allowed it in. So those are just a few things I'm thinking about now.
That's quite a handful. Thank you. I appreciate that in that context too. As you talk about augmented reality, kind of AI, and that piece of it, can you please share some of the work that the Empowered Brain Institute is doing with that piece in terms of tech and what that looks like? Because I think that's such a concrete example of what you were just sharing.
Yeah, so we don't always use augmented reality specifically, but we are attempting. I'd like to think of it as we have a lab where we're able to think critically and creatively about how to cultivate a learning environment where students of differing abilities are able to come together and engage around content in a way where everyone sort of gets what they need. No one's stifled, and they move along a continuum and progress at their own rate without the pressure of competition. Also leveraging, today's cutting edge technologies. And so one of the things that we've been doing for the last couple of years is partnering with the MIT Media Lab to really make these workshops real. And so we have some of the most amazing young scientists I think I've ever met, who have a deep passion and commitment for this work and for improving outcomes for divergent learners. And it's just sort of a workshop, where we're trying different things. We're building on. I mentioned earlier universal design for learning. We like to think that we've improved on it, in the sense that we've incorporated the neuro aspect more intentionally, and also fleshed it out a lot more. And the Media Lab, MIT Media Lab itself is a workshop and a hub for emerging technologies. And so they have access to things that commonly known about yet, or even in use. And so we get a chance to just sort of like tinker and figure out like what works. And that's been an ongoing activity, and really, really fun and fruitful. And I think from the testimonials of the families that have been involved, it's been beneficial for them.
That sounds super fun and actually quite wonderful. I guess really my last question in this, as we think about the quality of education and our ability and where we can reduce inequities, do you see technology, especially as you're just speaking about, as a way to really touch on the UN's two goals of quality education, of the combination of technology and education, of the UN's two goals of quality education, reducing inequity, as a possible solution for our learners within the continuum?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So, in my opinion, and I think this is what really motivates me to continue this work and to get into the work, I think, is like the fundamental challenge is, and the way it relates to quality education and reducing inequality and improving equity is, the foundational challenge is how we deal with difference. Dealing with difference, I think, in many ways, is where we have our hiccups. It's where we stumble. If it's in education, it's like, oh, this kid learns differently than another kid, or in the workplace, this person looks differently and has a different culture than than most of the people in this workplace. Like, how do we reconcile that? Like everything's not smooth. Like systems dealing with difference is where we need to direct our attention in order to really remove some of these hurdles that keep us from nurturing individuals to be their best selves in every environment, right? Obviously, we have more control in the school environment because students are there, especially to learn and be nurtured and sort of imbued with skills and talents and things like that. But once, as they get older and move into the workplace and start to live their own self-sufficient lives, it gets more challenging because there's no concerted effort to care and to consider and to actively engage in like continuing to support those individuals. And I think the tools of technologies in a lot of ways can help us to sort of remove bias, right? So we see that happening in the hiring practices where like we think we know what's perfect for our company, but it tends to just be someone like us. And so in that way, technology can help take over that process and actually bring in talent that would impact and improve the bottom line of the company, but may not be talent that we recognize based on our limited experiences. And so that's one way it happens in the workplace. But I also think that to the extent that educators are not identifying the strengths of students or misidentifying them or overly focusing on deficits, technology can help one give tools to kids to demonstrate like that their talent, right? In ways that they may not have been able to do that without the technology, but it also allows teachers to be more objective in the way we're viewing student ability and supporting it, and more equitable in how we're supporting it. And so I think those are some ways that and also technology in terms of training adults to better work and support with divergent learners is also like an important place where I think it can be useful.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems like across all aspects of it that it can be immensely useful in really reducing inequities and making every situation a little bit more equitable. Well, I really want to thank you, Rafiq, for taking the time and chatting with us today. And I want to thank Ideagen for including this topic into the 17 days of sustainability. I really appreciate it. Have a
Yeah.
wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's been great. Thank you.